Around the Sol system, all non-human ships and station personnel panicked. Earth had become a dead zone for anyone who seemed to get close. They had no idea what in the hell was going on. All they knew was that ships that got close suddenly went dark and drifted into the ether of space. In fear, many ships refused to enter the Sol system altogether. And within a single solar rotation of Earth, so many ships refused to enter the Sol sector, all mining or harvesting stations had been abandoned, not destroyed, as they believed it would be worth something to come back to, but they would leave until whatever issue was happening was taken care of. The entire sector was restricted for anyone to go through. Some investigators, and of course a few curious groups, would enter the sector and then quickly found themselves well and truly screwed, as their vessels would send small reports before simply going dark and disappearing off all radars. Not a single electronic piece was still going. The only thing they had was sometimes there was a burst of electronic interference, but they didn't know what it was. Ships, stations, nothing substantial was completely lost, but it was just not something they wanted to risk. Regardless, once the ship went dark, no one was coming to verify what happened, as they still had no idea what was going on. They didn't know if there was some sort of plague or if they were being hunted down in that area. They knew it couldn't be the humans. I mean, seriously, they never would be that. But because they didn't believe anything as far as speculation goes for the humans, they really didn't have any other answers. For well over 10 planetary rotations of Sol 3, the same dance happened, although it started to spread further out into the system as more ships would go dark as they would try to cut across the Sol sector as some sort of shortcut. Commerce was being affected so badly that it was getting beyond what anybody could understand. Many stations near the Sol system started to evacuate out of fear when transport and cargo ships would go dark, moving their goods anywhere near the system. They would suddenly go off the reservation, off the map. Suddenly they were unreadable, and sometimes they found them just drifting towards a planet. As they didn't want to know what was going on, they just left the ships to crash. Yet they all took notice what was going on. Eventually, the initial invaders just had to investigate, so they assembled a very large fleet that would warp into the area just outside the system and open up their formation to make sure they weren't all affected or shot by whatever the hell was going on. And they would move very slow and methodical. Once inside, they spread out in a huge formation and began to advance slowly. Large range scanners could not reach very far into the system as they seemed to be jammed. Not with jelly or anything like that, but they were simply stuck. It was like trying to look through a haze, and the sensors just couldn't do it. So they had to turn the sensors up to maximum level, and there they could cut through some of it. What they found just absolutely surprised them. The system was not a dead zone. In fact, it was very much alive. Foundries were working, and there were even more than what the reports said. They couldn't understand this, as right next to one of their own old harvesting stations, there was one or sometimes two more in full operation. As they looked around the system, ships scurried about from station to station, to planet, to satellite to satellite. What the hell? Everybody watched this in complete amazement. How can something so alive be such an area of contention? This didn't make sense. But as they looked, they all realized something was off. Getting closer, they could start to cut through even more of the jamming field, and they could see all the ships that were lost. They were beginning to register each one at a time. They seemed to be in very good condition, considering that they had been lost sometimes almost a decade prior. Intermixed with those were ships of an unknown design. No one in the entire fleet had ever seen this design ever, and they were completely confused. Yet these ships seemed to be purpose-built for commerce. As they started counting up the 100 or so missing ships that seemed to still be in working order, alongside the 2 to 700 of these other unknown ships, they couldn't get the exact numbers. Things were very sketchy. They couldn't understand what was going on and were about to send out a message as, without warning, a message came in. Yet it was simply repeating, "You have entered sovereign human territory. Power down all weapons and engines and prepare to be boarded." This message just continued to repeat over and over again, and it came through the speakers in their own language. They were surprised at first, many of them still sitting on their coils, but they all recognized an obvious threat. Yet who it was coming from made them all stop, look at each other. And even though sound does not travel in space, you could hear the entire battle group begin to laugh uncontrollably. Even the captains and admiral could not keep their professional demeanor as they just about fell on the ground and thrashed, they were laughing so hard. When the admiral was able to speak again, he ordered the comms to open up and send a response. Straightening himself, he looked straight into the video feed and he said, "Humanity is under the rule of the Calbera Den of Schmeckel. Since they have failed to keep you apes under submission, you will surrender all holdings to the Den of Chode. Send forth your surrender, along with a manifest of all your new and current equipment, fortunes, and slave counts. If you refuse, our Grand Navy will annihilate your race. Prove to us that you understand your place beneath our coils, and we shall let you survive in servitude, which is your place." It takes a few minutes as the battle group slowly advanced. During that time, the Calbera admiral could nearly taste the first human he would consume, though he had to remember to take their outer coating off, as sometimes that needs to be, well, removed violently, as they would end up spitting out their food. He didn't want to do that again, and as he knew, a naked human tasted delightful. The admiral advanced the group to flank speed. As he approached, he was surprised that the humans and the captured ships seemed to not stop their commerce at all. It's like they didn't even understand that they were under assault. His cold blood ran hot as he saw that this was a sign of disrespect, and thought how he would treat those leaders, how he would teach them a lesson publicly to make sure this didn't happen again. Less than 10 minutes later, the radar operator shouted, "Massive numbers of warships leaving Sol 3, 4, and 2, along with several satellites, sir." Surprised, the admiral didn't even get a chance to order anyone to battle stations, as the comms officer yelled, "Incoming transmission from human flagship. They seem to be hailing us, sir." The admiral had it put through. "This is Fleet Admiral Nimitz of the Human Earth Fleet. We have received your message, and we have compiled a data packet for you. Unfortunately, we will not be able to greet you in person for another 76 hours. I trust our data will suffice until then." One of the comms officer whispered just low enough that the admiral didn't hear it. 76 hours? It shouldn't even take half that. The human had finished speaking, yet it was obvious he was trying to keep his teeth from showing, as this was a sign that they were ready to attack. As everything calmed down and the video ended, the admiral relaxed as he believed the humans had realized the folly of their ways. The speed of the response must mean that the humans are scared or just smart enough to know what's going to happen. Either way, he had a response. He was thinking about devouring the admiral while he was still alive. Made the Calbera admiral just about drool. "You are wise to surrender. I graciously accept your data and look forward to greeting you in person." The Caldera Admiral turned off his comms. Stupid humans. The data pulse came in just a few moments later. It was so much, so fast, it was glorious for them to see. Every ship in the fleet received it and were almost giddy at the idea of all the riches they would now acquire from the humans. All these new ships, all this new technology, more stations, and more products than they could even think about. Opening of the files, they didn't get what they expected. Everyone's consoles, everywhere around the bridge, were covered in thousands of videos of human mating rituals, though many of them defying the reports of what a human mating ritual actually was. But along with that was different static screens that seemed to offer to sell one item or another. It was all translated into their own language, but every time they could close one of the videos, another one would automatically begin. With them were more advertisements that blocked the crew from seeing what was on their comm screens and restricting them from doing their job. Then they did something that you never do. They hit the accept button, as they did not understand that to close it out, they simply had to touch the little X in the corner. In less than 30 seconds after receiving the data pulse, systems began to fail. Weapons began to malfunction. Targeting systems, together with the weapons, made many ships randomly fire and sometimes fire into each other. Life support would turn off and on, going into so many extremes that it would shut down the entire system as it burned itself out. Engines misfired so much that the safety systems shut everything down. Eventually, as in another 30 seconds, all consoles turns off and the ships went completely dark. As the Columbra Admiral watched his bridge go through this chaos, he could see other ships go dark in front of him through the viewports. And of course, some of them were not just going dark, but also firing randomly right beforehand. When the lights went out, he saw one of his destroyers vent part of its engines on its port side. This was usually done to rapidly cool an overheating engine, but now all it did was spin the ship uncontrollably in basically a flat spin as it tumbled through the formation. The Admiral, for a moment, wished he was on that ship as realization set in of his situation. The crew of that spinning ship would be dead in less than a minute due to being crushed against the hull via centrifugal force. Other ships accidentally shot each other and simply exploded or vented their atmosphere. Without the safety systems working, the crew would be dead very, very quickly as they choked to death on lack of atmosphere. The Admiral grinned, and the realization truly came in. The crew was desperate to fix the ships, but without the ability to even open a hatch. The crew had 69 hours of breathable atmosphere remaining. The human admiral said he would arrive in 76 hours. In front of his entire bridge, the admiral began laughing maniacally at the absurdity of this complete situation. He thought to himself, how did the humans come up with the idea to take down an enemy with a massive computer viruses?